Do you often get confused when you want to upgrade your system to play latest games and cannot decide what to upgrade? Or you want to build a new system but don't understand which components will serve your needs better? Fear not, we are here. The Indian Frustrated Gamers presents what does each component of computer does for gaming and how you can plan your build accordingly. I know many of you might have scratched your head on the fact that which computer component to buy for gaming without thinking much about what each component does to the frame rates, right, or frames per second numbers for which you are shelling out the cash. Well, this video series will try to explain some of it. I will be dividing the video section into several parts. So mainly the parts would include what does a CPU does for gaming, what does RAM and storage do for gaming, and what does graphics card do. So we'll start off and we'll be heading to our first part, which is what does each hardware component do? Part 1, processors or CPU as we might call them. So as mentioned earlier, we are going to discuss what each hardware component does for your games and what should you upgrade if you're facing some issues with games, like issues like stuttering or lag or anything on that sort. Do remember, before we start the video, the computer is only as fast as the slowest component. So, starting things off, what exactly a processor does, when we talk about gaming. So, it means or it does that how the next frame or how the next instruction to the graphic card will be sent. In other words, processor in gamings mean that how fast a processor can handle a particular detail rendered by the graphics processing unit in journal. Processor handles the details and tells what is next. The CPU also feeds updated graphics engine information to the video driver for rendering, which would, in simple terms, mean that if suppose you are playing, a game in which you have a gun and which, ammo is required to actually shoot, right? So something like this would translate to suppose we click on left click. So if we click on left click, if the ammo is there, CPU will instruct the GPU to play a specific section or specific animation. And suppose if the ammo is not there in the gun, so which animation to play. So basically it acts as a director. In short, anything that's graphics related still has to pass through the CPU. The CPU says, this bot now has 0 HP. Graphics card, I want you to play that animation 01. Where that animation 01 is a kind of animation file, right, which is there in the game code itself. While the GPU performs the actual polygon movement or the animation, right, fancy word for animation, the CPU acts like a director in telling the GPU, again the graphics card, what to load, what to perform, and when to perform it, while leaving the task of how to do it to the graphics card. Examples of such scenario where you can actually check, right, your CPU power. I will be trying to explain such scenarios now. So what we'll try and do is we'll try to put some examples from a real life, and those examples you can actually practically perform right now as well to check that what exactly is the bottleneck, is the CPU causing issues or any other component. You can actually do so after watching or listening to what I'm trying to say. So there are two things, which I would consider. One would be that we have good graphics card and we have ample of RAM, and but our processor is not that great. As in, we can take an older processor which is paired up with the latest graphics card. Okay. The second scenario we'll go ahead and take is where we both the CPU and rest of the hardware are old, so that we can actually see the difference. Now, suppose in our first scenario, we have a graphics card like a 1080 Ti and RAM like we have 16 GB. So we have ample of rendering and holding that render right? We have ample of power to actually go ahead and play games. Now, what issue you will come across is, suppose you load a new scene in the game. To load that scene and to render all the files, the CPU must tell the RAM, as we discussed earlier, right? The CPU must tell the RAM and the GPU that, look, guys, we need to do this, this, and this. Now, by doing so, if the CPU is slow in comparison to the GPU and the RAM, what will happen is it will fail to cater to the graphics card and the RAM speed, and issues will happen. Now, when I say this, let's take an example. Suppose you are in game. Let's take a heavy graphics game title, any title, but we'll concentrate on single player. Suppose you are playing a single player game and you're experiencing 80 frames per second constantly. Now, when a new scene happens, you straight away observe that the frame rate has dipped to like 20, and then after some time it has again regained to 80 frames per second. So on an average, you're getting 80 frames per second. Yes, this particular scenario can also mean that game is poorly written, as when something new is loading, the frame drops. But if this kind of observation is there on every game, we can conclude that the processor is causing issues. So how to conclude that that this was actually the scenario? How we can understand this is, suppose the graphics card is rendering each and everything at 80 FPS. Now, as soon as the new scene loads, the CPU has to load it from the secondary storage, okay, store it into the RAM, and then from the RAM, deliver it to the GPU, mentioning that, okay, this is a new scenario. Now, suppose since a new scene is loaded, the older chunk of the files, right? What it has to instruct to the GPU is, okay, look, these are the files that you need to look into, that you need to run the animation. Now, it is not able to deliver those files, or not able to instruct the GPU fastly enough. That's the reason the GPU dips, or the GPU does not have the frames to work on. So the GPU is slow in providing this frame, and thus we see the frame drop. Now, another question you guys might ask is, you might be thinking that you must you might have come across many guides which only mention that load time issues are actually related to CPUs, not anything else. Let me tell you this: load times issues are somewhat related to CPUs, but more or less depends on your secondary storage. That is a hard disk drive or an solid state drive. Since the introduction of SSDs, the isolation of the loading time issues, right, has been done because SSDs are quite fast enough. And still, if you're facing load time issues, even if you have an SSD, still you're facing issues with load times. More or less, the CPU is at fault over here. Now, coming to the as described earlier, we'll go ahead with a second scenario. Now, again, what now we'll go ahead and do is, in a scenario, we'll take two resolutions. One would be 720p and the other one would be 1080p, and we'll see how in your in your PC right now you can actually gauge that what exactly your CPU needs to your CPU or your whole system needs to be upgraded, which component you need to upgrade by running this particular scenario in your own PC. So as I was mentioning, we'll take two resolutions, 720p and 1080p. Now, s- suppose you are trying to run a game, and what you're what you're seeing is, on 1080p you are getting a specific number of frames, and you are not able to go beyond that. When I say not able to go beyond that, I mean is there might be times that you might have observed that the FPS are actually going, you know, quite ahead of that number, but on an average, that is the maximum frame rate you're getting. Now, suppose on 1080p you were getting again, 80 or let's take 100 FPS. Now suppose you were getting on 1080p 100 fps. What you do is you reduce your graphics, you reduce each and everything, and you reduce the resolution as well to 720p, and you try to run the same game. Now when you run the same game and on lower details and on lower resolution, automatically, as you guys might know, the the load on the GPU is reduced, because now the rendering which he has to do of that animation file, right? If you remember, run animation file 0 or whatever. So the rendering is the rendering of that particular animation file is quite easy now, because it is not complex since we have reduced the graphics quality and the resolution. But still, now you're not getting FPS which go beyond 100. Still, it is on an average you are getting the same FPS, which is 80 or 100 FPS, right? So this now explains that the CPU is not able to provide the processing power which is required to go beyond that FPS limit. So basically, this means that the processor is not able to provide more information to the GPU, and the processor itself is limiting the power of your graphics card. I could have easily showed you this particular scenario using my system as well, but I don't have any random hardware lying around. I'm not Linus or G2, but you get the point what I'm trying to explain, right? So to as I was mentioning, this particular scenario happens. Now, what to do? Suppose in your homes you are also observing this, and what you can do to improve, such scenarios is, first of all, if you're getting 100 FPS, I don't think there is a need. But suppose you are getting only like you're getting 40 50, and even if you reduce your graphics settings, then also the FPS count is the same, then I would suggest that you go ahead and upgrade the CPU right away. So by looking into such scenarios, right, you can easily examine that how a system behaves. I'll be coming up with more videos like this, where I'll explain GPU and RAM behavior as well, if those are causing issues. Also, some of you might be watching the video, and I understand that this is not the most accurate explanation. I should have explained frame times as well, but please understand, those who already know about all this, that this particular video is catered to the audience who are not that technical, and I'm just trying to explain them that how they can isolate and plan their upgrade. So again, thank you so much guys for watching and listening. I hope this video was useful to you, and if it is, hit the like button, and anything if you want us to improve, to mention, right, the same, and do subscribe. Thank you so much. My throat is not well. So if you feel any disturbance in the video, I really apologize for the same. Okay, thank you so much. Have a nice day, and keep on playing. GG. Bye bye.